We can see Sean Crichton just get out of the rear passenger seat. Quite clearly the two of them there stood in their winter jackets, winter hats, flat caps. You can also see that there are people in summer clothing, and what struck us was the fact that the clothing that Crichton was wearing seemed very out of place for the 12th of August.
This revealing CCTV footage placed Crichton and the other two members of the gang acting suspiciously in a green Rover near the vicinity of the murder.
We clearly had images of the registration number which married up with the burnt-out green Rover, so it started to come together, and I believed at that point clearly we were in the right direction, and that it was appropriate at that point to make arrests and gather whatever other evidence we could get.
3 men have been arrested over the murder of Gerry Tobin, the Hells Angel biker shot dead on the M40.
Armed police carried out early morning raids on 3 homes.
Armed officers arrested 3 men in connection with the murder of Gerry Tobin.
Hells Angel Gerry
The men have been taken to a police station in
after raiding 3 properties in Coventry and Nuneaton.
The biker was shot while riding his bike as he was travelling on the M40 10 days ago.
On Saturday, the 22nd of August, just 10 days after Gerry's murder, Sean Crichton, Simon Turner and Dane Garside were in custody, helping the police with their inquiries.
And I could have drawn the line under that and said, well, the case is done. But I felt quite strongly that actually others were probably involved in this.
The 4 remaining members of the gang were under the scrutiny of the law. The undercover police had identified them through the surveillance footage they'd gathered on Crichton. They knew names. Now they started checking their movements on the days surrounding Gerry's murder.
We uncovered images of them on the motorway services at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. The white Range Rover had 3 members of the gang in it, and that was stationed at junction 11 at Banbury. The blue Renault, we had sightings and other detail of its movements between those 2 points, between junction 11 and between junction 15.
This evidence would show Carl Garside, Dean Taylor, Ian Cameron and Malcolm Bull in prominent positions staked out along the M40, casting a deadly net to trap a Hells Angel. They'd been planning the murder for many months, staked out the route and organised their disguises. But they then made the simplest of errors. They'd used their own cars, which could be clearly seen on CCTV, which led to the one thing they hadn't planned on: getting caught.
I think they felt that they'd done enough to remain anonymous. I think after such a short period of time, particularly after 10 days since murdering Gerry, us knocking their door came as a hell of a shock to them, and I think that was evident from their immediate reaction when we did knock their door.
Now the entire chapter of the Warwickshire Outlaws were in custody. But would they break the code of silence when put under intense police questioning?
They simply responded either no comment, the words simply saying no comment, or said nothing at all, absolutely nothing to any questions put to them.
After 40 hours of constant questioning, 6 members of the gang remained silent.
Where were you at 1 o'clock on that Sunday afternoon?
No comment.
And who were you with?
No comment.
How had you left the house that day?
No comment.
Although the gang members were exercising their right to silence, the police gave the suspects every opportunity to defend themselves.
You had the hat on to disguise the tattoos on your head.
No comment.
What can you tell me about the death of Gerry Tobin?
No comment.
The 7th one did speak. He accepted that he was involved with the others in gathering intelligence, gathering information about Hells Angels around the area of the Bulldog Bash site, and that he tried to tell us that was a fairly innocent activity.
Malcolm Bull had broken the #1 rule of silence, and although his statement didn't give much away, he would now have to live with being labelled a grass. 13 days after Tobin's death, DS Lawrence had all the evidence he needed.
We were able to satisfy the Crown Prosecution Service that there was sufficient for them to be charged. So all 7 defendants were charged with murder.
On October the 2nd, the Warwickshire chapter of the Outlaws went on trial at Birmingham Crown Court. The city would be brought to a standstill as the Outlaws rode into town.
Police investigating the shooting of a biker as he rode on the M40 motorway say they're examining the possibility that gangs may be involved in his murder.
Crown Court was told he was targeted by the rival Outlaws biking gang as he left a Hells Angel festival.
Hells Angel Gerry Tobin's murder had caught the attention of the nation. Birmingham city centre ground to a standstill as the 7 defendants of rival gang, the Outlaws, were brought in for trial.
Certainly at the beginning of the trial, there were hundreds of members of the Outlaws motorcycle gang who would come into the city and stand outside. They tried to get inside the court, but only a small number were allowed to do so. But the remainder stood outside and, to be fair, were fairly intimidating to people passing by.
For fear of retaliation from the Hells Angels, a grand-scale armed police operation was put into place to protect the city of Birmingham from an all-out biker war.
It was almost as if the police were transporting a mixture of Hannibal Lecter and the Yorkshire Ripper. Nobody had ever seen anything like it.
We knew that it was a volatile situation. We weren't sure whether Hells Angels intended to also attend the trial. We felt, had they done so, there could have been some quite serious confrontations.
But the Hells Angels kept their distance from the trial, and the anticipated confrontation outside the court never materialised.
Everybody was kept well back, and then the sirens would start and the blue lights would appear, and this great motorcade would come sweeping into the city, police cars at the front and rear, and a prison van in the middle with lights on itself, and they would be swept into the courtroom, straight into an underground entrance, and then the gates would slam shut, and the accused would be led up to the dock.
A dramatic announcement on the first day of the trial. Sean Crichton, leader of the Outlaws, had written a letter to the prison governor of Her Majesty's Prison Woodhill, wanting to change his plea.
Before Crichton's dramatic admission from the dock of court number 12, he'd previously refused to acknowledge the charges against him. A formal plea of not...
The accused has confessed to the killing. Sean Crichton's change of plea to guilty had been kept secret until now on the orders of the judge.
We had a message from a prison governor while he was on remand to say that he wanted to speak to us. And I sent some detectives to see him in prison, and he handed over an A4 sheet of paper in which he confessed that he was responsible for the murder. He denied that any of his companions within the chapter of the Outlaws was responsible, and he pleaded guilty to all offences, the murder and firearms offences, on the very first day of the trial.
This was Crichton's desperate attempt to take the rap, hoping he would save his fellow gang members. His handwritten confession of guilt meant he would not be seen again in court before sentencing. Now it was down to the prosecution to convince the jury that the rest of the gang were equally guilty of the Tobin murder.
They're a frightening bunch. They look like how you would expect them to look. They're heavy set, fairly grim-faced, tattoos, earrings. They were unwilling to take any part in the trial. It came out in evidence that most of them had been involved in day after day of police interrogation, police questioning, some 40 hours in each case, and almost without exception, they all simply looked back at the police officers and said they had no comment.
Gerry Tobin's mother bravely attended every day of the trial, witnessing the events that led to her only child's murder as they were played out to the court.
You're seeing your son lying on the tarmac, and I remember a helicopter voice saying that there's a biker down, get somebody here bloody fast or something.
Needs to get here pretty bloody quickly.
Maria needed all of her inner strength as she sat in the courtroom just meters from her son's murderers.
One of them stared at me and I looked back. And then this person pulled a face at me. And I stood there with the courage and the strength of my boy, eye to eye. And it was he that needed to turn from me.
Maria watched intently as the prosecution's case against the 6 defendants mounted. The weaponry consisting of knives, machetes, knuckle dusters, and even target practice mannequins. The burnt-out car that had been previously owned by Crichton. And the extensive CCTV images were shown to the court.
It was almost a murder on film. They could be clearly seen riding in convoy, one in front of the other, along the motorway. You could then see the car containing the gunman coming up behind them. Even registration plates were quickly identified from the material that was available to them. So the police did have a pretty strong case. It was almost a murder in pictures.
The defendants offered very little. Simon Turner, unemployed, married with kids, said he was in the clubhouse at the time of the murder. CCTV showed otherwise.